continue our series of budget workshops. And I want to say thank you again to all the staff who has worked tirelessly on the budget. And we also thank all of you who are presenting today, because it's another big chunk out of your schedule, and explaining it to the board is very helpful. So what we finally settled on yesterday was, after you say what you want to say and need to say, that then we will sort of go around the table as board members and ask questions if we have them,
Okay.
rather than sort of pepper you from all directions. All right, so you have the floor first.
Okay. Thank you for having us, and we appreciate the opportunity as well. Chris and I would like to begin with the document that I handed out to all of you. Just draw your attention briefly to our vision statement, our core values and beliefs, and our 21st century learning expectations. And specifically, a couple of hallmarks: personalized learning experiences, which I'll talk about in the context of class size in a few minutes. And then what I describe as the 4 cornerstones of our vision statement, which are leadership, integrity, scholarship, and empathy. Very important for our kids. And then in the core values, if you just take a look at that last statement there, that talks about the climate in the school, the common beliefs that we have. And you'll notice in the budget, we try to fund really good opportunities in professional learning and opportunities for our kids to learn civics, to learn ethical behavior, to learn about what a school climate really should be. And you know, that comes with a price tag to it, but we feel it's really important, so I'll elaborate on that a little bit. The 21st century learning expectations, we are like you at the point where we're making the bridge to the new portrait of the graduate very soon. So, but this document guides our thinking and our prioritization and our decision making as we pull the budget together. So this is very important. Some of the priorities, if we can state these, and I'll go through the whole high school budget and then Chris with athletics. We try to really protect and support the instructional core, and that comes down to students, content, and teachers. So when we make decisions, we always say what's best for students and kids, and we try to make sure that the instructional core and the classroom is protected. So that's one of the major lenses. Personalized learning, I alluded to in the vision statement, is really, really important because we're trying to get to know our kids, to care deeply about our kids, to care deeply about their academic learning and their social and emotional learning. So I would just draw all of our attention to policy 6151. I think we're all familiar with around class size. So we're trying to ensure that we have class sizes that allow us to really know our students and to optimize learning and instruction. In the area of school climate, academics, and then but also the social emotional needs, you'll notice in the budget that we do invest in school climate programming, and I'll just cite a couple of examples for you. Link Crew, where we have our upper class leaders come back and lead, for example, freshman orientation, to orient and to some extent inculcate our freshmen and what we're trying to accomplish here and how we like to treat each other and behave with each other. There are quite a few summer curriculum days that are in there for the advisory program, where all the students have an opportunity to have a trusted adult in the building with whom they meet every other week in small groups of like 12 students, so that's important. We are continuing our funding of our Teen Talk Outreach Counselor, which in the context of the high school budget comes with a price tag of basically $20,000. That's with the Kids in Crisis program, and we're finding that we recognize that across the United States, in the state of Connecticut and Wilton, we're not immune or alone. Social emotional concerns, both with students and families, are increasing. They are paramount, and they're impacting students' learning. So this is somebody who works with students who have substance abuse problems, students who are at risk for various factors, and also families. So we want to make sure that we have that in the budget. We're also doing some important work at the high school, and this is my final comment around climate, around what I might describe generally as just understanding of diversity issues and culture. So we had, for example, Michelle Stewart-Copeson this year, paying her to come lead our faculty in trying to set the type of climate we have where it's just inclusive of all students, regardless of where you come from, regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic economic background. And all that ties in with our priority around connectedness. And we moved the needle on connectedness last year, and we're working to do that again this year. So that frames that out a bit. Chris and I, and we really want to thank this Board of Education for supporting our 6 new courses. We're all aware of those, but briefly, Advanced German, ECE German, UConn EC Advanced Spanish Conversation, American Sign Language. I was down at the middle school recently, and when the school counselors down there announced that, kids were really excited. So let's see what the enrollment trend is, but we're looking forward to get that off the ground. Honor Civics and Contemporary World, Advanced Media Production, and then WHS Pre-Algebra. I bring these up in the context of the budget because, as you know, you've reviewed the 6141s. These come with some costs. There are summer curriculum days, there are materials, there are supplies, there are textbooks, and we think in terms of a really comprehensive and dynamic and contemporary curriculum, it's really important. So we sincerely thank you for supporting these courses. Some of the numbers, just the bottom line here, we're at 15,301,000, and this is recent numbers from Marianne as well. Basically represents a 1.5% overall increase at the high school. And we think we've come in with a responsible, relatively lean budget trying to help the district get to the 1.99, 2% range. So we feel as if we've been responsible. The athletics increase that Chris is going to talk about in a minute is higher than that. The athletics increase right now, based on everything that we've worked on together with Marianne and her office, is right now around 8.6%. So that's where we are with athletics. We're flat with overall staffing. We do have in our budget this year, we anticipate a retirement in the main office, so we anticipate shifting one secretary, and it's already in there, from 10 months to 12 months. But we did cut one of our secretaries a couple years ago, and we've had other people stepping up. And so if this person does indeed retire, and that remains to be seen, if we get a 112 person in there, we think that's somebody that can really run and be an office leader, a manager in the high school. And it's such an important job supporting the administrators and the administrators. We did make some recent reductions that you may be aware of with the board. We've reduced $60,000 in furniture, $20,644 from athletics, $14,510 in general supplies, and then $18,250 from conferences and seminars. We were told that we can shift that money around a little bit, and we've largely completed most of that work, but we are making a few final shifts. One area that was cut significantly, for example, was just in pupil personnel and guidance, and I want to see our school counselors going out and attending cutting-edge school conferences and being very active in supporting all of our kids in the aforementioned social-emotional realm, but also in the college process. So I'm working right now to still shift some of that back a little bit. So again, in 2021, it's a 1.5% overall increase. Historically, the last 5 years, we've come in, I think, very responsibly at the high school. We all recognize last year we ticked up a little bit because of the, some of the work with the alternative program, which we fully support. And then my final comment here is, the good news is we're projected to be up in students next year. We're projected right now, based on Ellen Essman's work, at 1307. Originally, the number we have was 1285, so that's always good news. We want as many kids want to come to Wilton High School as we certainly can get. We want to take great care of them. So one of the metrics that I always look at the high school is just staff to student ratio. So based on the current staffing level that we have, our discretionary FT that I'm going to talk about in the 1307, the student staff ratio will be 15.51. 15.51 certified staff to students. So it's a bit of an uptick from the last couple years, but I'm one of those people, I don't believe in coming in and just complaining when it's a little bit of a lean year and then celebrating when we're up a little bit. So we're down a little bit this year. We'll try to make it work, but it could lead to a couple of ticks up in class size, and if the 1307 eventually becomes true, it could lead to some more difficult decisions in terms of where we direct the FTE in our staffing models.
What was your student staff ratio last year?
Last year was 15.25, and it's projected to be 15.51, so we're up a little bit. Okay, and then the big decision, the big series of decisions that we make at the high school, and I just want to respect the fact that some of you are new to the board. We have basically 86.95 overall certified FTE that I sometimes describe as discretionary FTE. And that's basically the FTE. What happens is we're in the registration process right now, and students will come in and they'll speak with their computers. In this case, it's all online. And so based on enrollment patterns, we essentially make decisions around the number of sections we offer of different courses and within different departments. And so that's where right now in the very near future, up throughout February, before we get ready to build the schedule, where we're looking at making thoughtful decisions around where does this 86.95 FTE go. And again, at the high school, it's really based upon this finite body of FTE, and then important decisions that we make as an administrative team with our instructional leaders about how to really thoughtfully dedicate that so we're doing as much really, really good work as we can for as many students as we possibly can. We have at this point, we have our one instructional coach that we'd like to support. Eric Mendelson is our humanities instructional coach who does tremendous work working with all the humanities teachers. He's currently very integrated into us bridging from the aforementioned vision statement and core values and beliefs to the new portrait of the graduate, and is taking a leadership role. But he's also out really working very, very carefully with our teachers. I'll give you an example. I was invited into a seminar with the students, a culminating seminar with the students up in the LLC today, where Hala Harani, the teacher you heard from last week, had the students presenting on their final project, and Eric was right there in the middle. He had coached the teacher up on recommended learning tasks and teaching strategies, and it was just a wonderful opportunity for kids to express and present their new learning. So it was very, very powerful. So we'd like to see that supported as well. There are a few little shifts in special education that Andrea will speak to. We are looking at taking a couple of aides and trading that for a certified teacher to impact caseloads and to lower those. And so I'm not sure if the board has already heard that
in my
already. Okay.
Just generically, some of the shifting.
Yeah, so that would be important as well. And I'll stop there. You may have some questions. I mean, overall, we really appreciate the support of this Board of Ed, and we recognize we're in this together because we love our kids and we want to make sure we're doing the right thing for our students in terms of our financial resources that really support our human capital. So thank you so much. Do you want to take questions on that part first, Debbie, and then Chris do athletics?
Sure.
Or whatever you can.
It's interesting that the focus on diversity that you talked about in terms of the climate. I have no idea what the answer is, but of our teaching staff, classroom staff, how many are of color?
At the high school?
Yeah.
I can name one teacher. We share with one teacher, and
Okay.
then there's some other diversity in the world language department certainly.
Yeah.
But
That's,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
probably 3 or 4%. It's fairly low.
Okay, I was just curious. And our student population is about the same?
No, our student population has grown, so I haven't looked at the numbers yet for this year, but we were at about 20% at the two lower schools and like 12-15% at Middlebrook and the high school.
So as we look to recruit, does that become for us?
It already is.
Okay.
Yeah, it already is.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I think this recruiting class that we had for 1920 was probably one of the most diverse classes of teachers that we've hired to date, at least since I've been here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other budget questions? Glenn, at that point? Is there?
Well, it's just about it. This is on as preliminary introduction.
Oh, got it. So I didn't have it.
That's on his question.
Budget questions will come, but yeah, that was on his.
You say
All right,
Eric
Andy, you
was
wanna
the
start?
humanities coach?
His name is Eric Mendelson. Yeah.
Is there only one coach?
We've had two coaches in the budget. We've had a STEM coach and a humanities coach. Finding a STEM coach can be a challenge, and it was this year. So with Chuck's great support, we were actually doing some contracting with an outside agency to do some support with our math teachers and our science teachers. So in the future, we hope to be able to hire a Wilton High School-based STEM coach again, but it was really hard this year.
Do you think that was a function of the amount budgeted to the position, or just a supply, an overall supply function?
Yeah, I don't think it was a quotient in the budget at all. I think it was well supported in the budget. I think it was just, it's challenging to find STEM educators, and also sometimes we run into shifting patterns where somebody shifts in a position, and that can present a challenge for us too.
Going back to the humanities coach, how come the salary is dropping significantly? Is there a new one coming in next year?
No, maybe Mary Ann can speak about it.
Who's doing
Yeah.
it?
Is it the way you guys?
No, it's who's actually in the position, so if there's a shift of who's doing it, you could have somebody come in who's at a lower
Okay.
rate than who was doing it previously.
No, that's what I was just curious if we have a new one coming in.
We hope to keep the same
So,
one for next year.
8208, so you had some shifting going on there between Kenji Naj and Eric Mendelson.
It's just this, yeah, it's their
So-
years of experience.
So there would be a difference in the.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then do we teach coding in high school?
We do, yeah.
Okay, is that under mathematics?
The teacher, the primary computer program teacher is a mathematics teacher. We also have some in both in business and in mathematics.
But from a budget standpoint, that would fall under mathematics?
Primarily, because he's got a few sections of it right now. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's Christian.
Yeah,
Christian
that's
Williams.
AP Computer Science?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just ran into a man
So computer science
I can't
falls
believe
under
high
math?
school doesn't have coding. I'm like,
Christian is a math teacher.
We do. Yeah.
Or it falls under, okay.
He had a minor in computer science, so he's a math teacher who, and I think we have it largely in the right place right now. There's been some programming also in the business department. But the answer, if they ask you again, you can say, yes, we definitely have coding.
perfect.
Yep.
Can I ask what exactly falls under like family and consumer science
Yeah. Family and computer science is like.
Computer science or
Consumer.
Yeah,
Consumer,
that-
yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. Family and consumer science is culinary arts.
Okay.
So you've got culinary art 1 and 2, there's a farm to table course. And then there's also, we've got some interior design courses. There's a preschool in that department. That's
Yeah.
facts, yeah.
Best preschool ever, just saying.
The child development course.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
loved it.
Any more
That's
questions?
all I have.
Okay. All right, it's your turn, Jen.
Can you talk a little bit about your building repairs? There's a 51.8 to 107 jump, but then later on, there's another repair maintenance that actually drops
she's looking
68
at.
down to 24. You guys just reshifting kind of where you're putting stuff?
You may have to table that question for Jose
Yeah.
tomorrow,
Okay.
Because I don't know that I have that detail either.
Where are you looking? What
Here?
number here?
Yeah, I agree with Kevin. I think Jose is gonna have a really intimate knowledge of the physical plant and building repairs, et cetera.
Okay.
Is this one
So that line it jumps like
$86.21.
47 to 15 is the line.
Mary Ann, do you-
47?
Mary Ann, do you have the detail?
47 to
No, I have ideas of what he was looking at for the building repair.
Oh,
I know
47
some of it was the
Oh,
speakers,
it's the same line.
the auditorium, right. And there was, tread on the stairwells that needed to be redone. So I know some of the items
Yeah.
that he wanted.
Jen, if it's okay, we'll get the entire list when
Yeah,
Jose
that's
does his
fine. Yeah.
presentation, if that's
Sure.
okay, and then we'll do the entire detail for the district.
I guess my other question, and maybe this table is also the new equipment jump, the 106 to 145.
Yeah.
Which one line are you on?
Is that on last
Probably, 'cause that's all I
equipment
do.
and furniture?
43,005.
42.
So when you go to equipment and furniture, when you look at the summary page in the high school, so that equipment can encompass multiple things. It can be athletic equipment, it can be equipment for the maintenance department, and so I believe there's one room of furniture that still made it, which is about 20,000 of that. It can also be equipment for the music department or science department.
Yeah, there was a
depending
3,000
upon how
ad in
they
art.
put that.
Really quickly, when the students go on, we had that great presentation about the trips that they want to do to Paris and to Spain, I believe. Does that cost anything, or that's all fundraised and, got it?
Would,
freshman.
Bob, the big increase in math? It's the biggest increase maybe
In FTE or overall?
Well, in dollars, the biggest
Yeah.
dollar.
Well, we made a thoughtful decision last year and looking towards next year of really dedicating FTE and teachers to mathematics. The initial thinking was try to lower class sizes, particularly in our algebra and geometry courses, some of the introductory courses. So we had large jumps in FTE in math, and we're projecting that to essentially hold true and or increase based on our models. So salaries and FTE.
Well, for the last 3 years, the FTE is flat. So it's just this coming year now that we're going to be increasing. 'Cause
Well,
the
and
FTE's
al-
been flat for the last 3 years according to the book.
Yeah, it actually, we actually increased math FTE for this current school year as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
you did?
Yep.
Doesn't show
Yeah.
at all. From 12.2 to the budget for this year of 12.
I see 13.4.
That's
That's
for
for
the
the
next
proposed
one.
budget.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the wrong one.
Over the last 3 years,
Right.
it's been flat.
So they
So
may,
that's-
they may have made a shift after the adopted budget as they were finalizing
Yeah.
sections.
Okay. Okay, and that's one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it was,
Don't
it was
forget,
it was
if
sections.
if there's a change in this year, this is what was in
It's
the
budget
budget,
to
so
budget.
There is a
it's,
budget,
right.
yeah, okay.
It-
So
Yeah.
you
it
may have
added a math
changed it after the
teacher.
budget was adopted then, okay.
Correct.
All right, okay.
Or if there was a shift, then
Yeah.
that wouldn't be reflected till we got the actuals for
Actuals, okay.
1920.
Okay,
But that's what it was, it was thoughtful dedication of staffing to math.
okay. And I support that. I mean, that's not an issue. I was just, because it stands out, it's the biggest dollar increase in the whole packet, so. Okay, good.
So you decided to make certain math courses smaller in class size?
We originally targeted the Algebra 1, Geometry, and they actually climbed a little more than we'd hoped to with some shifting, but that was the thinking, was try to lower those some of those courses where we knew students were performing at a lower performance level, that there were students with more diverse needs in those classes, and that's where we tried to dedicate the FTE. But we increased math FTE quite a bit.
What's your average ratio of your students per teacher per class? What do you try and keep it at?
I just shared that, so it's next year we're looking at 15.51, which is a little bit of a jump over last year, which was 15.25.
That's
So
for the classroom,
we-
or that's
That's
just for
student to
full-time?
student to
Student to
teacher,
teacher ratio.
yeah. So we historically have been, you can actually see that, historically we've been in the 15-point range.
Right.
And that tells us a lot. Now, that's overall averages. The departmental averages can gravitate up or down depending on the year.
Yeah, the average class size is around 20 departmentally. You can find it in the class size report.
Finder,
And
yeah.
I think I grabbed in the budget presentation I did for you guys last week, by department, you can see this current year's averages, and they were in the 19 to 20 to 21 range.
Got it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know, as we saw, there was a swing at Middlebrook because of sectioning. That swing is actually wider at the high school because you have more singletons here. So you'll have some classes that run smaller, 15, 16, 18, and some that run bigger, mid-20s, 26, 27 in some cases. I don't know if we're running any 30s this year, but we have,
Well,
you know.
We've got a couple
very rarely.
28s.
I know I already asked my question, but can I have a follow-up question to that question?
Did she yield you her time?
I asked her to ask the question for me, because I was like, I don't want to have to go back to me.
Deleted body.
I'm like, can you ask this question for me? The changes we're making at Middlebrook in the math program, is that going to affect the FTEs at the high school? Because you were mentioning Algebra 1 and Geometry, which I think is the most affected class because of the changes we're making at Middlebrook. So are we gonna have to have more 9th grade math teachers because of what we're doing at Middlebrook?
I don't think so. I have to go back and, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know.
You're talking about the course sequence changes?
Yeah,
No,
since
I
we
don't
don't have,
think-
since we're not teaching algebra so quickly at Middlebrook.
Yeah, it's just a redistribution of, I mean, you still have the same cohort of, the same number of kids, so it would be a redistribution.
Okay.
Yes.
So you might have more sections of one particular course, but fewer of another.
Okay,
Um,
all right.
And that course sequence at ninth grade
They're all
is
in a-
several years down the road.
Right,
But I'm right
well,
around there.
like 2 years, a
Yes.
year or two, yeah.
13 point something.
Yeah, I think the other, just for the benefit of everybody, the high school, in terms of their section, they run probably one of the most efficient staffing models because they staff to the section.
Right.
So
It can change.
you can see, you know, there's fairly tremendous variance year over year. First of all, I think one of the great values of the way the high school sections is they privilege the kids' choices. And so you'll see these variances where we'll add math or add social studies and then decrease in some others. And so you'll get just a change in total FTE allotments. They can increase 0.1, 0.2, 0.4, et cetera, based on needs. There's, as part of the, I think, established culture in the high school, it's very common for teachers to be 1.0 in one year, about 0.9 or 0.8 in the next year, or 1.2 the following year, and that's just, it's embedded in the culture. And it's, you know, fiscally, it's very efficient, not to mention how well it serves kids because you can, you know, prioritize staff to their needs.
Can I ask one more question? What technology education, what does that encompass?
Tech ed, we have, our tech ed teacher is teaching some Project Lead the Way, which is STEM. It is also, he has Stagecraft, which is the course where students work on sets in relation to the, you know, the theater department, so theater arts. Those are some of the tech ed courses that we have.
And then, so Project Lead the Way and STEM, so science, technology, engineering, but what exactly does that?
So
Neat.
Project Lead the Way is
Engineering.
kind of identified as a STEM program. It's like a curriculum that we buy. So we've got Principles of Engineering,
Okay.
Introduction to Engineering Design, and then we have the first year we run an aerospace engineering course. And we're in right now it's really the third year of our we committed to a 3-year sequence, and this is where we are. Yeah.
And so then, within this, is there kind of an opportunity to do kind of computer science or coding or those types of programs not on that AP track?
Yes, we've had a computer.
Like almost like a modern day industrial arts kind of corollary to some extent? Like, so I see kind of the core kind of math instruction, and I see the kind of core kind of engineering type instruction, and then you have like the family and the consumer science track. So I was just kind of saying, if there's another type of
But the technology
access.
also,
Yeah.
technology education here too.
Right, so that's what I was wondering exactly
Yeah.
what that, kind of encompasses beyond, that kind of, you said, beyond just the, the project lead, like just beyond the engineering, how what goes on.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going the right direction,
Okay.
stop me, but one of the pure, tech ed courses that we might have envisioned, I think for a while back, the high school said there's some other programs that we would rather have. So for example, there's a very strong video production program that we have right now, which is no longer a niche program, and it's a really important program for our kids. A lot of them go on to have careers in video production, news. We have the new course that was recently approved, so I think that's an example where we said, you know what, at some point there was less of a demand for that type of tech ed course, and we brought some different types of courses in that are a little more technology based, really.
If I can just
Yeah.
I'll
add
add
to
one
it.
too.
So coding is like a new literacy in a sense.
Yeah.
That if you really think about it, should be really embedded throughout all content areas. And for example, with the digital literacy course, one of the things that all our freshmen did was actually take a spreadsheet that they created together that was based on interviews that they did with different staff members, and using an app developer, they created an app that basically had information about who they should go to in the high school to get more information about services that they could asked for, and that was actually within the digital literacy course. That could be used in a social studies course or, an English course.
Okay. The other course, I think, in terms of just like real practical,
Yeah.
we ran a course last year called Help Desk, and it was very undersubscribed. And the idea behind that course was really to provide a hands-on kind of computing course that was in some ways self-directed, in some ways providing some additional student support for students who needed kind of on-demand help with their computers. So we were imagining the course for kids that participated, doing some break-fix work with Chromebooks, doing some like software work, also having some self-direction in terms of pursuing individual certifications, whether they're Apple, Java, Google,
Right.
Microsoft, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that course needs to be,
We're-
reimagined.
We're running it again next year,
Great.
so
Yeah.
as part of the LLC program, we're adding that as one of the things that our LLC staff will be.
Yeah, that's kind of more what I would, like something
Yeah.
that's
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
like
Mm.
a little bit trade orientated.
What, any more budget questions?
I probably was Anna and Mary Ann, I'm having a hard time tying these numbers when I go back to the details. And to match. It's difficult in some cases, number of line items. So maybe something not for everybody else.
So we can look at it afterwards, and I might be able to print a summary page for you.
Yeah,
for
well,
the
it's just
school
something
that
like
might tie it
substitutes
together a
is
little
pretty,
better.
substitutes is pretty easy, but I
Right.
can't get.
Well, that's because we condensed it to one
One
area.
area.
So
Yeah, I
that's
know,
what
but
it
I
seems-
can't
The other
get-
ones are by,
Right.
Yeah, but I
by
can't get
program.
this
You-
number to tie back to these numbers on these pages. That's the
Okay.
question, so.
Okay.
But we can talk about that, okay?
Yeah.
Gretchen?
This probably was answered yesterday, but the social security line item, which I think showed up on all of the,
Yes.
that's new because,
We
Yeah.
took it out in district and pushed it into the buildings because we have to show it by building per pupil cost when we report back to the state.
okay. And then, the field and athletic trips for $176,000, does it fall under the high school? Because it's field trips as well as
That's
help?
So,
It's
if I'm not
specific to the high school.
mistaken, with the field trips and the
Transportation.
athletic, that's gonna be a lot of your transportation for games, for
Right.
Mhm.
sports is going to be part of that.
Do you have a page, Gretchen, you're looking at?
It was 8,100, 8,450. It was on the second page. I was just looking at the summary.
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, I saw that it was last year's too. I was just trying to figure out if that's where it went. And then what are the stipends?
Oh, there you go, yeah, I got it.
The Stipends would be instructional leader stipends.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Guidance stipend, social studies,
That's right.
what is
Those
it?
Team leaders.
They're akin to team leaders. They're, if you think of, sometimes people call them department chairs. So our instructional leaders teach a full litany of courses, so most teach 5. And then they get a stipend to do departmental work, leading the departments
Okay.
before and after school or during prep. So it's largely, when well executed, curriculum, instruction, instructional leadership, but it also, departmental needs, ordering supplies for the departments. It's a broad range of responsibilities, and they're really important roles.
Okay. And then the guidance, extra time, is that like overtime for guidance counselors? Or
Yeah,
is
they
that-
come in during the summer to do
Oh, okay.
schedule work with students.
I had anything else.
Is there, just related to that same thing before she jumps, it's significantly lower for next year, is that just what you guys project, and then it has the
Is that the
possibility
guidance?
of going up for guidance?
No, they had more days in than they requested for additional time last year,
Yeah.
than what they
I
submitted
haven't
this
cut it.
year.
I haven't
Okay.
cut
So
it,
the
yeah.
actual for the last year is gonna be more than what the budget was?
Right, so last year they had, cause I know 2 years ago they dropped the days, cause I went back and I looked at it
Mhm.
twice, and they have less days in there. And I
Right.
believe it has to do with when they come in and they do all the link crew and the different,
It's a,
trainings. I can tell you what they submitted.
it's a couple of things. They would want more days. I couldn't do. So some of the extra days, I'll give you the range of what they do. Some of the days are at the end of the school year, assessing student grades and transfer trips and determining what students might need summer school, for example, so to make sure students stay on track for graduation. We have school counselors who come in during the summer and do some work so they're available to families that are new to the district, so that we're more service oriented and we get students registered rather than having everybody wait right to the very end. There are also some summertime programs that may come up in the context of those questions. The other big piece of some of the extra days for the school counselors is they come back a bit earlier to make sure, because we build the master schedule and essentially lock it in over the summer. And they come in, and if there are conflicts beyond what the software and what we can relegate in terms of our human decisions, sometimes they have to bring students in and say, you know, we've done everything we can scheduling. You might need to make a choice between a few courses, and what do you want to prioritize so that kids have the right schedule on day one and they're not missing instructional time. There is also, as Mary Ann said, there's quite a bit of work. Some of the school counselors do the summer work to make sure Link Crew is up and running, the leadership program to organize freshman orientation. So that's part of what some of that summer money is too, and guidance services.
Right. So,
They do a lot.
so, but is that something that come the summer, their number could jump?
No.
No,
Okay.
they stay right to what we put in the budget
Yeah.
for them.
Okay.
So, and I know it was 98 days for the guidance counselors that they requested in addition, so between them all, coming in over the summer. And they had 40 days to revise and update, the advisory program, the SEL component. They had 40 days for that.
Right, it looks like in the budget, there was a big increase this year.
For this year.
From the year before, and now it's going back to normal levels, is that it? So is there,
I think that's the
is
question.
that the new link
But in the
work
summer,
or?
if they get there early, it could change, right?
So
That's what I'm saying.
you know, you either come in
That's what
3
it
days
is.
before school or you don't, so that's not the variance.
No, but that number could change if they come in earlier this
These
summer.
two together.
That's what we're trying to
It's
do.
It's really-
37, it's the 37 that's dropping, and the 37 is what I have for the 98 extra days that they requested.
Right, and then
To
this
come
year
in.
it was 66,
right,
I guess
that's-
that's the question,
And
was
they
why
did-
the drama? I mean, the swing.
I,
There could
and
be drama,
I
maybe
do
that's
know,
why.
because last year they
Drama.
requested them, because the year
Yeah.
before they got dropped, but they did not come over on what they submitted this year. So I just have a total of 98 days for them.
Okay.
I think part of my asking too is that in the past, not even in the past, but going through this whole process of getting on the board, that was one of the things that came up, that, you know, families were wishing to have more guidance counselors. So that's why I'm wondering now that I'm seeing a drop.
Well, I think we're talking about different things though. This is the summer days that they put in. Our school counselors, we've got 7 of them. Their caseloads are, I believe, based on high schools and even the DERG, they're reasonable range. We try to keep them under 200. There's been a little bit of a shift since we have the 2 flight counselors now dividing up the freshmen, but I'm confident to say that we have enough school counselors here to accomplish the work, and that our track record in supporting kids and also in the college process is very, very strong. So I wouldn't, as principal, I wouldn't advocate for an 8th school counselor. I think we're in good shape.
Jen, can you talk about what you heard though when you were kind of, were people, was it access in terms of time and availability of the existing counselors?
I think it was partly that, and I think it was partly trying to get into the whole college experience. I think that they felt like they needed maybe additional support in trying to
I see.
kind of, what's the right word?
Navigate.
Navigate, thank you.
And it's an
Navigate
interesting
the
question
process.
that, you know, has come up in other times in terms of just looking at what does that process look like? How is it supported? What do families have and need, and is there consensus? So I think that'd be something worth circling back around to.
So
there.
college counselors fall under guidance counselors.
They're the one and the same.
School
Where's the
counselors.
line item? I'm not, for some reason, I'm not seeing the guidance. I see guidance extra and guidance
You should see
stipend.
7 school counselors, and then there's a college and counseling career parent.
Oh, pupil
Pupil-
personnel.
Pupil
It's
guidance.
Pupil personnel, yeah.
Pupil
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Kevin, I have a general question to try and wrap my head around the coaching and instructional learning. What does an instructional learning head do different than a coach? So like at Middlebrook, we have a budget for instructional learning and coaches.
So-
And the high school, we have the same. I thought that Middlebrook got rid of the instructional learning.
So the terms are, you have the instructional leaders.
Yep.
Right, and those are, as Bob was describing, kind of quasi-department heads. So they organize the work of the department. At Middlebrook, they have different roles. So we call them all instructional leaders for the sake of simplicity. But right now, functionally, we have team leaders at Middlebrook. And we use that term team leader, instructional leader kind of interchangeably.
Got it.
And so they organize their grade level team. So the meetings that they have, the instructional coaches do the one-to-one or small group instructional improvement work with the teachers. So really working very specifically on pedagogy, supporting the implementation of curriculum. That happens during the school day while teachers are teaching. With the exception of the meetings, which take place during the school day, the additional kind of organizational work takes place outside the school day that the instructional leaders would provide. Clear as mud, Mandy?
Clear as really dirty mud.
One way you might want to think of it is that the instructional leaders do more administrative tasks, where the coaches are more working alongside teachers doing instructional work.
But aren't the coaches also pulling through curriculum?
Yes.
Administratively?
Administratively,
Like working with ideas and curriculum and working with you to pull through curriculum?
yeah, but that's usually writing the curriculum and then supporting the unit rollouts with the teachers. An instructional leader, like Bob mentioned, they do a lot of supplies and things. I think at the high school they do some scheduling issues, right?
They,
No?
no,
Yeah.
that's absolutely, so they lead the departments. Its intent is to provide instructional leadership, and they do, so curriculum, instruction assessment. They provide a lot of support, for example, for newer teachers, just making sure that they're able to be supported in their courses, that they have the curriculum, that they know what they're doing, some coaching on some leadership, some leadership on instructional tasks and planning. They oversee, right now, we've got a couple of situations where we have some long-term subs. They help oversee that process. They are responsible largely for the departmental budget compilations, so that, what do they specifically need for the departments, and then I get to go through and decide, where we are with the overall departmental budget requests. As Chuck said, they do a lot of the work in terms of when we build the schedule and do our sectioning, for example. I will do the sectioning based on students' course enrollment, usually have Don do it as well, and have the instructional leader do it, so we got some just triangulation of the data and that we're being thoughtful. So they're responsible for coming in and saying, this is the FTE that you gave me, this is how I propose distributing it among the different courses, and then we have a meeting in the mind. So they do a lot of work, and again, a little bit of a tangent, but many high schools have department chairs, and the department chairs will teach probably 3 sections, and then have 2 sections during the day where they're, so point 4, where they're doing a lot of that work. It's a little bit more administrivia than what we envision. We still try to say they're instructional leaders, and there's a big piece with instruction, curriculum assessment, and they're, for example, always involved in the curriculum reviews. So they do a lot of really important work to ensure that we have quality instruction within the different departments in the school.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I can only imagine what they're doing. I mean, we're paying them $17,000 of the stipend, so I'm sure it's a lot. I was just, when you said they basically do supplies, it sounds to me like there's a lot of coaching, instructional leader overlay.
There is a lot of instructional leadership as well, yes.
Because instructional leaders are not available to provide in-situ training to the teachers while they're teaching. So like you mentioned, Eric was right in with Hala, helping her to organize a lesson.
Yeah,
An instructional leader wouldn't be able to do that because they're teaching.
Right, I get that.
And they're non-supervisory. The supervision lies with the administrators in this model.
Ruth, Bridget, any more questions?
Can we just go back to the guidance counselors for a second? So there's 7 of them, and their role is college counseling as well as placement for freshmen, sophomores, juniors?
Yes, when you say placement for.
I mean, so if you've got, when you're signing up for courses,
Oh, yes.
that's, you go to the guidance counselor to sit down.
Yes.
How do I do this? What do you think I should do?
Right.
So they handle basically the entire school. They don't just do the college.
They do, they handle the whole registration piece, Gretchen, it's a good point you're making. They oversee registration, so teachers go into Power School and they make a recommendation, but the school counselors will have an individual meeting with each student and, talk about their choices, does it fit into their overall program of studies and their 4-year planning. Those discussions about where they might aspire to go within the college process begin relatively early on. So they're ultimately responsible, for signing off on those and making sure the student has a well-constituted schedule. And also, I think as I said earlier a little bit, if there's a conflict where a student needs to make a decision where they want to take a bunch of higher level courses and they might not all fit, working with the student and the family to make decisions around which course might you need to drop reluctantly and where does that fit into your college aspirations. So they do a lot. One big piece of what they do here at Wilton High School is the college piece. We call them school counselors. They used to be called guidance counselors, but a big piece of it here, because 98% of the students going to college is just the whole college process, and they spend a lot of time on that. But they also provide a lot of daily support to students with challenges that they face. I alluded to just social emotional concerns. I mean, just kids who have any kind of challenges, kids who are at risk for certain reasons and/or factors, providing them with resources, building a bridge between the school and the student and the family, so the parents are involved. It's pretty complex.
Okay. So I think that's probably also where, because I've also heard this, is that you've got 7 people handling 1,300 children. And, I think that the college part is so important, but yet they're torn because they've got all these other responsibilities as well.
You're right, yeah.
And especially as our 504s keep going up and up and up.
Yeah.
Right, so it's
So it is one of those, like, not to go harp on that other school that I went to, but we had advisory, and those were the people who took care of our day-to-day issues, our class courses, and would sit down and deal with us on a day-to-day matter. And then we had college counselors that did that, so there was sort of double. But I think that's probably where we're all hearing it, because those roles are so important.
Yeah, the way they have a wide range of responsibilities, and then I think the other piece that just makes it more nuanced is with the addition of the flight program, we took 2 of those counselors and they served the entire freshman class in a very structured way through a flight curriculum, which was intended to more smoothly onboard kids into the high school and provide them some academic skills, some social emotional support skills, as well as some a little bit around executive functioning, but future planning. And so, when you think about that work, it's actually the ratio goes up for the other 5. So it's challenging. It's something we absolutely should spend some more time.
And do you still do you have the same counselor all through your 4 years?
Well, the freshmen have the 2, and then they get handed off to another counselor at the start of their sophomore year, and then I think they leave with
They have the
the
same people.
counselor.
For 3 years. Okay. And we try to keep families together, so parents can conference on 2 of their kids at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm done.
All right, thanks. Ruth, any questions?
My just last question is the 8450, the co-curriculum, and then I'm looking in the detail / extended day program.
Sorry, where are you?
The 8450.
Clubs and activities.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's just
Co-curriculum.
after-school activities, because there's no FTE.
There is no
It's-
FTE
No,
that's
FTE is
affiliated with that, that's just, the club advisors are paid stipends.
Okay, so that's the club advisor stipend.
Yeah.
And and the clubs are, student kind of driven?
There's-
Like, is it like a are you talking like a Spanish club or?
Yes.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
a
Yeah.
load of them.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and so There's always kind of a club advisor, and that's, they get the stipend, but you're right, there's a lot of student leadership involved. If you're a good club advisor, you build the leadership of the kids and make it kind of more cohesive, but, I could provide, I have it actually in my book, the list, there's a ton of clubs and activities here, and it's really valuable because I always say, and I believe there's something for everybody, you know, if a student might not be interested in one thing, that there's always something for them, and if a student has an interest and a desire, we'll try to pilot clubs and
Yeah, that's
accommodate
it, okay,
interests.
so if a student comes to
yeah.
you and says, we wanna start this club, then we find kind of a teacher and some stipend and make it
There's a
happen.
process that they go through
Okay.
because the stipends are all kind of in the teacher's contract, so
Okay.
there's a pilot year and they have to make sure that there's enough student interest and
Okay.
support.
Okay, I'm just looking at the time, so are there other burning high school questions?
Yeah, I just have one again.
Sure.
I don't think, Bobby, in your opening comments, you talked about the change year over year, from this year to the proposed budget. Yet when I look at the book, it's 18.7%.
It's because the benefits
The
are
benefits.
not
This is
spread.
something we talked
Right.
about
Now,
yesterday.
what benefits though?
So we're spreading, as you know, we're looking to spread the benefits into all the schools right now, it's in the
Medical.
district. The medical,
Insurance.
FICA.
But it's not showing here, right?
No, it's showing in,
Wow.
it's showing in your,
Prior year.
21 budget, it's not showing in your 20. So if you look at, the
Okay.
high school,
Yeah,
there's a $2 million swing in the budget.
yeah, well,
versus-
2.8 million.
Or 2.8.
Right.
Of that, 2.5 of that is the benefits that we have to put in. We're currently working on getting that shifted in.
But they're not reflected in these numbers yet.
Not in the 2020 budget, they're in the 2021.
Where?
At the very bottom of
At
the.
the very bottom of the,
Summary
technical
page.
page.
So,
Where at the bottom of the, because I don't see it.
The bottom of one, top of the other.
Yeah, group insurance,
Group
social security.
Okay, way up top here. I
Yeah,
got you, there's
so
2.2
here,
million there.
yeah.
Got it
Yeah,
now,
so
okay, I didn't.
I'm
So
currently
last-
right
Yeah,
now
alright,
fixing
okay,
all
got it,
those to
yep.
get them to
Starts
even,
here.
we're having
Yeah,
to
with social
software.
security, I saw that.
Yeah.
Okay,
And it
I
goes
see it up there
through
now.
here.
All right, got it. Okay, thank you.
We'll have an updated book with everything spread, by next week,
Yeah, with everything kind of in the right,
even,
Yes.
all the way across.
Okay.
yes.
Cause it's sitting in the numbers are the same, it's just sitting
Yeah.
in the district and it
Okay.
throws off the
Got it.
percentages.
And I had in here,
Yeah.
in fairness to you, Mr. Hemley, I had, parenthetically, so 1.5% does not include the sped account, social security, defined contributions, group
Right.
insurance, and life insurance.
right,
Right.
because
So
they
without
were all
those in
central
there,
expenses.
Right.
yeah.
So the central budget's gonna be way down.
I think it'd be like 300.
In theory.
Nothing to talk about.
No, yeah, because you're taking, you know, millions of dollars out of it,
That's
and
right.
giving it to the schools.
it had a
Yeah.
reduction.
You know, it's,
You're gonna be a
they're
hero.
artificial constructs.
You're gonna be a
and
hero. Your budget's gonna be like, hey.
Never when it comes to budget. But
Okay.
thank you for that.
Anyway.
Are there any other
Yeah.
I was
small
finding another way at the last second.
Okay, we have just about an hour left and a lot more to discuss, but do want to thank you, Bob, for this
Are we
budget
gonna do
and
athletics at all, or?
Yes.
We are, and your
Yeah.
patience with our questions.
Thank you for your
My
questions.
my perspective is that year to year, it seems flat, level, and solid. Do you in any way feel disenfranchised or, geez, we should have put this in, we just couldn't afford it? Or is this level and steady is what you need?
We don't feel disenfranchised, we feel as if it's a thoughtful budget with the support of central office and the board, we believe we'll be okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
great, thank you. All right, so now we should move on to athletics. And Mary Ann has gifted us with a couple of new, just formats and perhaps more condensed set of pages to look at, because there's so many teams. So Chris, it's all yours.
Yeah, we do have a few teams. 31 and counting. So as I'm formulating my budget, my first and foremost priority is always safety first. As I'm configuring the budget that needs to play the game, uniforms, equipment, that's why our equipments are always up. And then there's always things that are uncontrollable. The cost of officials, that's up to 2.5% every single year. Cost of buses which is transportation to and from games, is 3 to 4% every year, and then goes to salary. So those are all contractual that I really don't have control over. So our increased enrollment this year in athletics was definitely caught me by surprise. This fall, we broke the record for the most fall athletes the school's ever had. And as of right now, and we haven't had the spring, which is our most popular season, We have 630 student athletes that playing at least one sport. Last year we had 830, that included the spring. So we haven't even gotten to the spring yet, so I know we're gonna end up breaking our overall unique
So,
record.
Chris, 6:30 is fall, winter combined?
6:30 is fall and winter combined, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there a particular team or? I didn't look at the
Indoor
numbers.
track is way up again. It
Okay.
used to be way up and then it took a dip and now we're back up again. All the other, with the exception of wrestling's way up compared to last year. I think we finished the season with 5 wrestlers. We're almost 20 wrestlers now with our new coach. He's been walking through the hallways and getting these guys to come out for wrestling. Guys and girls. We don't have any girls this year, but we've had in the past. So that, our coaches are very, very enthusiastic and they're getting kids to come out. And we almost actually had a freshman girls basketball team, which wasn't in the budget, but we would have made it work if that was the case. So we have a solid JV team, solid varsity team. So yeah, we're on the increase. This spring we will have a JV softball team. We haven't had a JV softball team in years. So.
You do accommodate if there's the desire for more kids than what you can handle
We
in the
will
varsity.
figure
You'll
it
put a JV or you'll put a freshman or,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
You don't just turn them away, say sorry.
Yeah, thanks for coming. No, we don't do
Okay.
that. Now, if there's other factors, safety, they try out for the team and we think there's an obvious safety factor, we
Well, yeah.
counsel and we work with them in another way. So, yeah, absolutely. So, yes, and you will see an increase in our equipment line. Last year, and actually the last several years, we've had to cut games for the sub-varsity. So I've put all of those games back in to try to get our maximum number of games for the sub-varsity teams in order to make the budget fit the last couple of years.
So you cut the games because you had to.
Yep, because
The budget.
cutting a game means cutting the officials, cutting transportation.
How many games did you count?
We cut a home and an away game from every JV and freshman game season team the last couple of years. So I put all those back in, so that's also constitutes the increase. So I'm hoping that we don't have to do that again. But primarily, I put together the budget to give the students and the coaches what they need to play the game. So equipment needs are just what they need to play the game. Nothing extra, nothing more, but for safety and what they need. So obviously we can't play baseball without a baseball. And some of the things we are trying to, down the line, our boosters are helping significantly with some things so for like baseball example, they're working on trying to get netting behind the backstop, which will stop the baseballs from going into the woods and never coming back. So those are little things. I mean, it's actually not a little thing. It's about $100,000 project that our boosters club is trying to help us with. But it's obviously a pretty big ticket item, so it's gonna take some time. But so that's just an example.
Do you have any sense of what the percentage is of public parent versus school spend?
Our parents will spend with the students, so we don't pay for every piece of equipment, so baseball, the glove, that's
Yeah,
individual.
yeah.
So individual choices, the parents will pay for their cleats, their gloves, their hats.
With the participation fees and the big donors, is there?
But well, our
a sense of-
participation fees that we have to pay, our participation fees goes back into the general fund, right?
So it's not shown in the athletic?
It's shown in there.
It's shown in there, right? So-
It's a negative.
Yeah, it's an offset.
Right.
Okay.
But it doesn't go,
120?
it doesn't
Okay,
go to
yeah, I'm
a
sorry, I'm
specific-
interrupting, keep
That's
talking.
okay.
Basically, that covers part insurance and,
Okay.
So as far as the parents' involvement, the boosters they pay for the extra stuff, the health stuff. So for example, our boys basketball, the boosters paid for their trip to Florida for their 3-game tournament down there. It was 100%, the parents and booster club paid that 100% and nothing came out of athletics, which was outstanding. And that gave more than just 3 basketball games against some out-of-state teams. It gave, team building, stuff that you just get paid for. It was amazing. And that is probably one of our closely knit programs as far as camaraderie and teamwork and team building there. That's an interesting group of boys right there. Other things the boosters do, that, you know, they help subsidize the extras, not the things that need to play the game, the extras. So, they're very needed and very.
And I know we're working on policies, not only with boosters, with other organizations too, that are associated with supporting, school stuff, so.
Right.
You know, just in terms of keeping accounting straight and above board and all of that.
Right. Right.
So Chris, can you just take us through some of the specific ads? So for example, you know, there's a boys ski team, or there's a $5,000 ad. So what is that? Just do the top line, the big numbers.
Sure, the big ones, it's probably uniforms. For example, the boys ski team, those ski suits cost about $400 each. And I try to do uniforms. I have it on rotation for every 5 years. I'd like to get it down to 4 years, so that way everybody gets a new uniform while they're here at the high school.
Can I jump in there for a
Absolutely.
second? Because I thought with the ski team for both boys and girls, it was you wanted an additional coach also added for
Right.
them.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
I
sorry,
have an
I'm looking at
additional coach
40205, it's salaries.
Right.
Oh, it is salary. Okay,
So-
then yes, that's a coach.
and
Thank you.
because the idea was for safety when they're skiing, one at the top of the mountain, one at the bottom of the mountain.
But there's a $5,000 increase on line 185-8413. That's not salaries, is
That,
it?
it would be yeah, so it's,
Oh.
in the detail, the
Oh,
first set of counts is salaries.
Which line is she on?
Okay. Oh, I
This
see
is
it.
all, the first page is all salaries, right?
I missed that line.
Right. So I believe that the bulk of ski is the additional
I think that, and that might be the only sport I asked for additional coaches this year.
Coach, yeah, okay, so it's a
Yeah,
full
the
time.
rest is
Yeah.
incremental.
Yep.
And there should be one for each boys and girls.
Yeah.
The trainer increase is just a swap out from his office to a trainer-specific line.
Right, it's just
Yeah.
moved. It was all under one and now it's
Okay.
under its own program, so we
Okay,
pulled
got it.
out them into the
Yep.
right salary line.
Do you have enough trainers?
We
I
have
ask
one.
you this every single year.
We do. We have 1.5. Well, I was hoping to get 2, but because of we had to make some adjustments.
Well, talk about this, because this comes up again and again. And,
Yeah.
You had 2 proposed last year,
We had 2
and when
proposed
we
this
went
year.
back and revised, we
Yeah.
went back to 1.5, and you said you could supplement with some contracts.
Right.
So just take us through the whole story.
Sure.
And I think Debbie's question is the right one. Is 1.5 the right number, and can we live with a little bit extra through contract, or must you have 2 to really maximize safety? And if that's the case, then, you know, where's the value added between 1.5 and 2?
Right. Well, if we had 2, to be quite honest, we have almost a quarter of a mile from the furthest field that we have to the furthest field going this way. So by having 2, we split the difference. And as far as response plan, God forbid anything happened. So ideally, yes, 2 would be ideal. We are subsidizing it with substitute trainers when needed. So if we don't have a game on that end of the stadium, on the end of the, you know, with 1 trainer is fine at this end. However, we always have practices. So I'm working on, with substitute trainers, I'm working on, with performance fitness, physical therapy, which is across the street here. They've jumped onto our substitute system for athletic trainers, so they will be available to us if we need a second. For continuity, it would be nice to have 2 trainers that our kids could be recognized. 1 male, 1 female would be ideal.
What's I'll just jump in, what's the cost?
Is that under contractual services?
It would be.
Like, what's the dollar amount for a half a trainer?
I thought it was somewhere around 27,000.
Well, 25
But then
plus
I have
the,
benefits.
plus benefits is the part I don't know. Right.
It can be as much as 30 if they have a
Right.
payment plan.
But
So
you've
it's
got,
cheaper to do the contractual as well.
oh, because the contractual right now is 31, and there's no.
And I think we should just do it, you know, because the value of the trainer being full-time, permanent, the relationship with the athletes more than offsets, you know, the cost of having somebody they don't know, they don't know the kids, they're not around, not recognizable. I mean, it's, you know, I don't know. I think it would be penny wise and pound
And especially if you have an increase in student, an
Penny
uptick in
Forge, yeah.
students. Like,
Yeah,
that's a dramatic rise in,
630 kids
that's a
who've
dramatic
done
rise
fall
in
and spring- or fall and
participation.
winter sports.
But I have a question about the trainers. So what sports specifically are the trainers at? Cause like for skiing,
Every,
there's not a trainer there, there's a coach.
No, but they have, at the mountain, they have
Support staff,
medical
right,
personnel there.
right, so we're counting on that. When we are traveling to other towns,
Mhm.
who is owning the
The other,
medical?
the other trainer.
The other trainer from the other town?
Yeah.
So it's just for home games and practices?
Home games and football are trainers travel.
And are they
um,
all
and-
certified to be sports trainers as
Oh,
far as?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. They, all athletic trainers,
But I mean, you were
they have
mentioning
the
you're
initials
using-
after their name, like.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, the
But
ATC,
when
yeah.
you use the, like, physical therapists,
Mhm.
are they also ATC or are they just PT?
They would be ATC.
Okay, so
The
any
people- the person I
contractual
talked to
service.
has ATC.
Got it,
next
got
to
it.
him. Right, but again, the continuity wouldn't be there.
And right now we have one male and one part-time female?
Yes.
So the female sports are the ones that are being impacted?
Oh, no, we don't, it doesn't, there's no gender, so, Cynthia, our female trainer, she'll cover boys basketball, she'll cover
Okay,
football.
so it's not like the,
Oh, no.
okay,
It's geography.
Absolutely.
got it.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so, perhaps, we're not gonna decide this today, but if we could get a written description of the cost of the, contracts and the subs you use versus the cost of adding .5 trainer and a little bit about the rationale. And then when we get into our larger budget discussions where we may or may not change budget, you know, this would be on that list.
Okay.
Are there any more questions though around the trainer that keeping the research? Okay, thank you. Continue, I'm sorry.
I think I'm open up for questions.
Well, talk about, because you had, your budget within the high school grew the largest, so if there are other particular equipment needs, because I think it was in the athletics that grew that equipment line.
Yeah, I was just curious
So I
what
wanted
the
to
greatest
call out,
driver.
we talked about some uniforms maybe for the ski team. What else is driving
Yeah.
your increases?
It was primarily uniforms, because we had to cut uniforms for the last couple of seasons. Boys soccer is up for uniforms. I believe girls hockey, girls golf, it's not uniforms, but it's golf bags. That gets replaced every 4 to 5 years. Some fitness equipment in the fitness room, that was up. So honestly, it was more or less uniforms. It wasn't anything major equipment. It was some helmets for lacrosse and ice hockey that need to be replaced. Helmets in ice hockey and lacrosse only last 2 to 3 years, where football helmets last 10. And we have a we have a revolving thing with our group over at Stadium System. Reconditioning, right.
All right, so there's the uniforms equipment, then there are the 2 ski coaches?
Yes.
Okay. Any other coach ads?
No. I would love to add, personally, I would love to get 2 coaches at every level. But sometimes the varsity and the JV say share each other, so then they're covered like for boys and girls basketball.
So there's 2 ski coaches for both the boys and for the girls?
That's what I'm asking for.
Oh,
Right
okay.
now, there's 1 boys, 1 girls.
So what's the current status of the relationship with Norwalk Rowing Club? You know, just I heard some chatter within the last week or 2 that we're trying to formalize a relationship or have a rowing team.
Well, we're talking with them right now. They're volunteering. It would be a free sport, so they've offered to pay for everything.
Answer
And
yes.
I've asked them to get certified, which they are doing. So they're becoming
Wow.
certified coaches, and it's going to be a free sport. Well, we're gonna call it a club to see if it takes off in the next couple of years, following the
And how do
policies.
the kids get there?
Just like ice hockey and swimming, they would have to transport
themselves.
themselves. Yeah.
Where are we on, the scoreboard?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, I've been working with the Parks and Rec Department. And since they are going to start using the scoreboards, they've made some calls up to, Fair Play, which is up in Hampton Engineering in Massachusetts. They came down last week. The scoreboard down at, the football stadium has been fixed. Willie's scoreboard will get fixed, and Park and Rec is helping us with that, since their youth is
So
going to
we're
start
fixing
using
it,
them
we're not
more.
getting, I remember you were mentioning the first
was
day,
new.
getting a
Right.
new scoreboard.
Ideally, I would love video scoreboards in both,
Right.
but that's a luxury.
And have we
So-
looked into outsourcing that to, having a company sponsor that?
So that's a possible, that's something that just recently, to look into.
We're allowed to do that.
Sure, I mean, we have an advertising policy, and, we would, it's per, either superintendent and or board approval, but yes.
The scoreboard's outside, I have to work with the town, this is a little different than anything inside the building, because the fields are owned by the town.
Right.
And Park and Rec maintains them.
So who owns that scoreboard?
Budget does not fall under your budget, the
The
scoreboard budget.
scoreboards have fallen under my budget, but recently it's my understanding that the youth teams wanna start using the scoreboards, so Park and Rec and us, we're gonna kind of share the responsibilities
Yep.
moving forward.
I only ask because I'm twofold. Number one, we lived in Darien for a while, and they're so on top of the apps and the videotaping, and at any point you can go on and watch any Darien
Mhm.
game, and I guess the cameras are on the scoreboards,
Right.
which I thought was fascinating. And also, I went to a Kiwanis meeting recently, and in going through the budget, I know a lot of time during budget season, a lot of people who don't necessarily have children school age are questioning things like the hockey and the football, and I think if we can integrate those people into coming to watch the games more and being more involved and seeing what happens, even like in some towns, they have ideally, I see along Route 7, having a better signage of the stuff that's going on at the high school,
Yep.
to get people who don't have children involved. All these Kiwanis gentlemen were like, we never know when there's a game, we would love to come see what this supposed great high school football team is, or hockey, and it just made me think how great it would be to integrate them more into our sports department to support it both financially and socially for the kids who are playing.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, if I wanted to get a sign out by Route 7, one of those electronic signs.
Right, I mean, it
Absolutely.
kind of blows my mind that we
Yes.
don't have that.
Mhm.
Would that fall under private funding, or?
It could, I mean, we could pursue private funding, I think we'd have to, it'd be a conversation we need to have, with the town. This was
Yeah.
something that I think early on when I first got here, we talked about, and there didn't seem to be, a strong appetite to put a digital sign out there on Route 7, although there were certainly some real benefits to that.
Who owns that land? Is that the town? It's not the school?
Everything is the town.
Right,
Yeah, I
obviously.
mean,
Okay. So
we're
it's not private
tenants.
land right there at the corner or anything?
Not to my knowledge.
And then, what about, I know there's a bunch of private groups, I can think of J.R. Sherman as being one of them. Who
Like
are-
the Youth Sports
Right,
Association.
and so what is that act like a boosters, or where does that money go? Because I know they're raising large amounts of, or they're in the process of trying to
Right, J.R.
raise.
Sherman's group, along with David Clune and Mr. Cody, they're working together, and actually have some of our students working with them now. You'll see the signage around the fields.
Yep,
That money is going to help maintain the turf fields and potentially upgrading scoreboards and things like that. Anything outside, it's more or less, right now, it's directly related to the turf fields.
right.
And I think maybe some of the upkeep of the new track, when and if it goes in, next summer.
And so does that fall under the same policy, Deb, as the boosters?
Whatever.
Oh,
If they're
as a
giving-
That's town.
if they're
That's, I mean,
giving
that's
us-
really, that's
There's
a
it's
town
not connected
arrangement
to it
because
today.
they're,
Yeah.
town
The town
owned, town
field.
maintained.
Right.
So we really haven't had any, I mean, I think we might have had some conversations.
Okay.
But we didn't have any, say in kind of what advertisers or
Got it.
what it looked like, that was really town run.
And then, what's the status of our turf fields?
Well, they're both brand new.
So, like last 5 years, 10 years?
Oh,
Last year.
Two.
Yeah, really
10,
only last year.
minimum of 10, up to 12,
Okay,
so, right. And you mentioned, communication out there to the powers to be, watching games and things like that. Eric can talk more about this, Wi-Fi was just put in, I believe. last summer.
This past summer, we put Wi-Fi into the football fields. We also have coverage, I'd say, on the majority of the athletic fields that are close to
the baseball
the
field and
building.
Lily?
Yes, so, which one's Lily?
Lily's over here,
Lily's
on the far side of the field.
Far side of the field, we have
The other
access
turf
over
field?
here, yes.
Yep,
So we have wireless access that we put in there, and then we've actually used that to broadcast a few games already. But there, is the opportunity to use that, where there
Yep.
were some discussions about using paid services last year. We now are able to leverage some of that bandwidth for not only instructional pieces, but also for game broadcasts.
right.
I'm working with the CIC right now, which I haven't even had a chance to talk to Eric. There's these things called NFHS cameras, which is the National Federation for High School Sports. And there's a possibility that we might be able to get one for free, along with all the equipment to run it and everything.
That would be
Since
great.
we're gonna be hosting, a lot of state games in the very near future, and along with, some college showcases, this summer, starting with girls basketball this June.
Great.
I'm done officially.
Efficient. Okay. Any other questions for athletics? I'm just cognizant of the time, that's the only reason I'm kind of pushing it along.
So
Maybe
Debbie, if
cut
we,
anybody off.
I imagine the technology conversation is gonna take some time, so, I just whispered to Chuck, we can probably fold him into a conversation tomorrow, his budget, if we use the balance
Okay.
time today. And we
As
can be
long as-
flexible.
Yeah, that's okay with you. That's
Sure, of
probably
course.
okay with us. All right, well, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
I think Bruce Lively forecasts the girls,
He does feel
He
like.
does.
He does
field
field
hockey.
hockey, yes.
Yeah. Using the
Yes,
facility,
with his app.
Yeah.
We have lacrosse, last year we broadcast the lacrosse showcase.
Should we do the cross?
That was awesome, the collegiate lacrosse game.
Yeah,
Oh my
I wish
God.
I was in town.
So good. Are you guys doing that again this year?
That was JR that was his
Oh,
arrangement.
so good.
So, I think it was wildly successful. I know he was interested in doing it again. I haven't seen anything, to suggest commitment. Great, okay, Fran and Eric.
Well, thank you for having us. My friend and I were talking, I'm just gonna start off with a little foundational piece on sort of where we are and on the sort of the technology infrastructure plan. We put together a 5-year, and a 10 and a 15-year IT infrastructure plan that really went over looking at what the current needs are of the district, and where we need to be in replacement cycles for equipment. When you look at us starting the plan, we're going into the 4th year this next year of the plan. We started off really looking at the infrastructure here in the district and some of the foundational needs in order to create the ready access environment we currently have in the district. And it came down to, we needed switches, we needed wireless coverage, we needed internet access, we needed the ability to rely on those systems so our teachers and students could access the software and systems when they needed them in the classroom. And we've actually been able to replace all of the equipment at the high school, middle school, Cider Mill, and Miller Driscoll, and expanded our coverage out to our instructional spaces outside the buildings and our athletic fields. So we've been able to take care of that foundational need. Where we are headed as we go forward is we're starting to change how the classrooms look with some of the technology that we're going into classrooms. So we're moving to laptops for all of our instructors, and we're removing desktops so they're mobile. And we're not providing 2 or 3 pieces of equipment to staff members. We're in the process of looking at how we're re-envisioning the classrooms, from smart boards to interactive displays, wireless presentation spaces throughout the district, and standardizing. We have many generations of technology, and trying to standardize across buildings in the district with some of these systems is going to enhance our ease of use and also our ability to support those devices. In the current budget that we put forward for technology, we have a couple of increases. And the increases, we have a $321,000 increase in the IT budget. Of that, $34,000 are new expenses for staff. That's Social Security and some of the benefits pieces that have been added. So the actual increase is about $287,000 is the increase. And those increases are primarily on 3 lines. And I'm just going to briefly discuss the 3 lines, and then I'm going to turn it over to Fran, and I'm happy to answer any more detailed questions as we go forward. For our conferences, seminars, and training line, we went up by $6,420. That line is up because we're looking to bring PowerSchool trainers in to work with our building administrators as well as staff in the buildings to look at how we're using PowerSchool and looking at how we're doing scheduling and some of those district processes and standardize those across schools and also do some training so we can more effectively use that software system. For the technology lease, we have a $176,000 increase. When we started the 5-year technology budget, we were looking at reducing our budget significantly and going into a 5-year leasing plan where we would lease about $250,000 worth of equipment. We'd have a $250,000 lease every year for 5 years, which would allow us to gradually increase the IT budget here in the district, but would allow us to reach a level funded area of about the same cost we had 6 years earlier. So the $2.5 million would be about where we would end up 5 years later, and that would become a level funding area for IT and allow us to continually refresh the technology needs of the district without having to go out for additional funding or bonding, and would allow us to just really level fund as we move forward. So instead of having large increases when we purchase lots of computers or switches, we'd be able to absorb that as part of our 15-year plan. And so that was a $176,000 increase this year. And then contracted services, we really have 5 areas in contracted services. We have a JAMP renewal. JAMP is a software product that allows us to manage all of the Apple devices we have in the district. It allows JAMP, JAMF is what it's called. The JAMP product allows us to actively push out applications to all of the iMacs and iPads and Apple devices we have in the district. So if we need to push devices out to a grade level, to a teacher, to a class, we can do that and manage that from a central location. It's the same way we manage with Google for all of our Google applications across Chromebooks. It allows us to really manage hundreds of devices without having to visit each device. That's $32,000, and that's a 3-year renewal. That saves us about 33% of what the renewal cost would be if we purchased it year over year. So that would be a purchase this year, and then we would not purchase that for another 3 years. We have $25,000 that's new to the budget this year, and that is for security services. This is for software systems that will allow us to look at the systems we have here in the district and also allow us to help train our staff. These are preventative systems that will allow us to provide training and also look at areas that could be exploited on our systems and our networks.
Eric, can I interrupt you for a
Yes.
second? Because we heard a little bit last night from the auditor about the need for additional sites. So is this, you're talking about penetration testing and then spoofing and phishing
Yes.
training? So just be specific.
Okay.
We'd heard some,
Oh, we saw
that's a recommendation coming out of the management letter
Yes,
from the
that's
audit.
exactly what this is doing. This is going to allow us to do penetration testing, active penetration testing on our networks, and spoofing and phishing training for all of our staff.
And do students get trained on that as well?
Students would be trained on that, yes. This is what we're putting in here. We can actually work with our students on, but this is primarily centered around our administrative systems.
It's part of
here
our
in the district.
digital citizenship curriculum that we already had embedded as part of boot camp and through other courses.
Mhm. We also have e-waste removal for some of the systems we're retiring here in the district. We pay for the devices to be removed and then recycled, but when they're recycled, they're actually taken and destroyed, ground down, and the metals are taken out and the plastic's recycled instead of being stripped and resold. So that's our e-waste removal. We have something called paper cut software. This is allowing us to actively manage our printing here in the district. We've had serious overages in the last 3 years. We're actually ahead of, under budget this year because of the paper cut software. But this software allows us to look at where our printing is, where our needs are. And so far this year, we've actually eliminated 68,000 pages of printing. due to people choosing not to print the documents that would have just gone directly to a printer.
I think they were mostly mine, because I couldn't get it to work.
Yeah, I'm like looking at all this, like,
We have a lot of printing. And then the remaining contracted services, there's $37,000 in additional contracted services increases. Those are increases for Power School, all the other contracted services we have, also some of our outsourced support through our Novus contract as well. So that's a $37,000 increase, and that's just increases in licensing for all of those items. And those are really the primary drivers of the IT budget this year. Okay.
All right, so with that, thank you for this opportunity of going through the budget and basically telling our story. Eric told about the story of the infrastructure and how it really came to a point where we were able to then implement fully a digital learning program. So what I like to start with is our vision and mission. When we started 4 years ago, we started with what is it that we were trying to do. And our vision and mission for the digital learning program was, how do we create an environment that supports student-centered, personalized, and innovative teaching and learning for our modern learner. If you are recognizing this as something familiar from recent discussions about the portrait of the graduate, you would be right. We were right in line with where our district was going in terms of our vision, mission, values, promises, and of course, as we move forward into the next year, our portrait of the graduate. So I just wanted to kind of like bring us back to the beginning and how this has actually progressed, because our budget absolutely reflects a direction that's progressive and has been really recognized in a big way beyond Wilton that we're very proud of. So we're calling digital learning in Wilton Ready Access, and we did that with a lot of purpose and intentional thought, because what we really feel is that we provide equitable access to all our students, and we make sure that they can access the resources, the devices, and are also skilled at what they're doing. So we really have a complete instructional program. We're resource rich, so that we have good quality vetted resources that are really important to us, because not only are we giving students choice, we're giving students quality choices. We're giving them opportunities to practice their learning, show their learning using those tools, and solving problems. So in year one, when Eric and I first started, which actually was year 0 of our implementation about 4 years ago, we planned, we did a lot of inventorying. I was half-time here, actually not even for the full year, and we began shifting management of the resources. So what we did was we took a look at the schools, and we found that there were lots of resources out there, right? So they were in different places, in different departments, in all of the different schools, and in some cases there might have been even duplication of having these resources out. So we started with an inventory. We started very slowly, but we started bringing them into a center, cost center, that became a new one. So we had the technology budget, and what you're looking at is what's called the Library Learning Commons budget is new. It hasn't really been in existence more than 3 years. That first year, actually, that I'm talking about, there was only a technology budget. This was basically to support the digital learning initiative. So we looked at what we wanted to do, and we also looked at very closely how we could best do it without too much of a budget implication. So we took a look at how many Chromebooks, for example, we had. We had carts all over. So we took all that inventory in, and we made sure that we took that and we actually used it as we deployed the following year. After we took stock of what the plan was and we got the message out and we put together all of the processes, the second year we implemented fully. So our actual first year of implementation was only 3 years ago. And we implemented Chromebooks that are district provided in grades 2 through 8. Beginning in 6th grade, as many of you know, the Chromebooks go home on a nightly basis as well. At the high school level, we provide devices for students that need them for loan or for long-term use, but we also provide a BYOD program. We, on a district level, provide resources and resources that span the palette of what would be called the textbook, right? So we have a few different resources that are actual e-texts. We have lots of resources that are used as choices within, our English classes, our social studies classes. We have wonderful research databases, and we also have a lot of tools that students use to create videos and to, show their learning in different ways. Last year, as we kind of went over through our technology review, we were recognized with lots of different awards that we're very proud of. We also focus on digital safety, and we implemented tools like Gaggle, which monitor everything that's done on G Suite, our Google platform, so that students in that environment are also safe and are alerted if things, for example, profanity is actually found. What we found from last year to this year is that by using that tool, we were originally having higher incidences of gaggles in a sense, and we're now under the national average. So digital citizenship and actually using the tool has really garnered some results in that. We also, on a monthly basis, have our students and staff produce about 696,000 documents that are either Google Docs or Google Slides or anything in G Suite that you can think of. Go through that, but about 700,000 different documents are produced by our staff and students, monitored by Gaggle, and it just shows the productivity. We are now in year 4. Next year was actually our year 4 of the implementation, but year 4 this year since we began planning. So just to give you kind of the context. So this year, this will bring us to the budget. This year we're beginning to look at how do we actually maximize what we've already have, and how do we actually target and make sure that everything's used the best that we can. So there's a couple of examples of this. One, we're implementing a what we call a single sign-on portal, so it's really easy for students to get onto different resources. In the lower grades, called Clever. We began deploying it at Cider Mill first. Then the folks at Cider Mill helped Miller Driscoll, and we trained them, and within the next month, we expect teachers and students to be able to use that also at Miller Driscoll. What it allows students to do is to go to one portal, and instead of, and I don't know if anyone's ever had the username password issue where you forget how to get into a program, this actually is one place that you go. You can click on all of the different tools that you would need for a classroom and be able to get there quickly. And that has saved us, by the way, in the last week or so, about 3 hours of instructional time for our students, so it's very effective. We also have begun working with a platform called Learn Platform, which provides us with analytics. And the reason I'm bringing that up is it will provide us with a way of communicating to the larger community about privacy and our data privacy and our resources. But I can also go in and take a look at which tools are being used the most, so that as we move forward, we have a digital learning dashboard, and we can look at statistics, and if we want to, make changes to what resources we are using, we have some data to really go by on doing that. I'm gonna go through the budget in terms of the bigger items and just talk a little bit about. Overall, our percent of total budget is about 3.5%. In technology spend, the national average is about 5 to 6%. So we're much lower than the national average. And I've just begun doing a comparative analysis with my friends in the neighboring districts, and we're either on par or a little bit under. It tends to be about 4% in our neighboring districts of basically what Eric presented, the IT and the LLC budget combined. So in terms of some of the things that you're seeing in the digital learning or the library learning commons budget, there's a couple of drivers. The first is training and conferences. That's going up next year by about 19,000. Primarily, that's really to support the district vision and the portrait of the graduate. And essentially what part of that budget is intended for is for Marie Alcock. Those of you who've been to the long-range planning meetings know that she's been presenting at those meetings. I've talked to her about working on, what we're calling modules for each of the attributes. We need to at some point operationalize the actual final portrait of the graduate. And the portrait of the graduate is going to be something that we need to make sure that all staff, parents, students, everybody's very familiar with. And rather than having lots and lots of face-to-face, the way that I've been doing PD in the last couple of years has been asynchronously, meaning that we have this online kind of presence, and teachers can take time to access the information and do discussions and learn from it like you would with an online course, only they have the option to actually, meet as well. The idea with the portrait of the graduate is that Marie would help us in actually coming up with what those modules would look like that would help us frame those attributes. In addition, I have money in there for Ed Leader 21, which is really Ken K's partnership of the 21st Century Skills. It's changed names a couple of times, but that also supports our work. And the other part of this is that we have workshops for students and staff from EdTech team. This past year and the year before, we were very successful in having EdTech team come in and work with Middlebrook students who then became innovators at Middlebrook. We want to expand that to the high school students next year because I think it's just appropriate to expand that, and that is in training. Another priority is something in additional time. You'll see that there's an additional 13,500 in there, and that is for a project that Eric and I are dubbing Digital Day One. And what we're trying to do with that is to make sure that as we begin school, as we're going back to school, that students and staff have access to the most important resources day one. And that's going to take extra time on staff to come in over the summer and help us with the rostering and to check and to make sure that things are in place. There is an additional $6,000 within digital resources. I'm going to go into the digital resources line and kind of divide it up a little bit. That has more to do with some of the projects that we've talked about in theory in the last couple of years that have to do with what would happen if we took parent workshops, which we know that are really valuable, and we don't always get the turnout that we want, but we could record them and archive them, like you would with a web conference, right? We need the technology to do that, and we really need to buy, whether it be a GoTo or Zoom, that kind of a web conferencing tool. I also put in there a screencast/podcasting tool, because not only would that be useful for students who really want to do more on podcasting, but for teachers who want to create their own podcast for instructional materials.
Fran, what line are you on?
This is for digital resources, and it is
44,227.
Got it.
Yes.
So that's all inclusive.
That's all inclusive in
You're not
that, and
breaking it. Okay, got it.
I'm breaking it down for you in terms of the
Got
things
it.
that are in there.
I'm so sorry.
I also have in that same line, in terms of new, this is really what I'm going into, is what's called a YouTube Safe Share. For our younger students and for teachers who want them to access really good YouTube videos, we don't want the extra around it, if you know what I mean, the extra that tends to pop up. There is a tool that allows us to safely share videos without having the additional
cue.
comments and the things that are on the side and the cues, so it would be something that would make it safer. I also have in here things that we just need copyright-wise. I think that it's something that we tend to not think about. If we use an image, we have to make sure that it's copyright protected, right? So I've got a Britannica image database in here where we can make sure that teachers and students all use images ethically. And the same with movie licensing. I found out, I guess a year ago, that we show movies sometimes and we may not have the licensing to do so. So I now am protected with Swank movie licensing, that we just have that in there. We also have in here Adobe certification for students. It's going to support the advanced media production class at the high school. A tool that's going to allow us to do e-portfolios, and something that is also related is my involvement with the website and ensuring that we optimize that and really work on our communication plan. So one of the things that we've looked at is adding a newsletter module to School Messenger, meaning that in addition to having the alert system, which we have currently, there would be a way for departments as well as schools and PTAs to use newsletter module to send out newsletters. And finally, I have $5,000 in supplies because last year we began a really big project at Middlebrook that had to do with their classroom libraries, and we inventoried and we actually processed, and we now have classroom libraries that our ELA students are able to access in the LLC, and we know that they can circulate. So that's for scanners that we buy for the classrooms. Just on a side note, I want to thank the board and the community for supporting this program, and every part of the Library Learning Commons. A few years back, I came in and I said, even our library collections need to be revamped. And I came in with the stats where the average age of the collections by school ranged from 1996 at the time to 2006. I can say that that has improved greatly with your support, so thank you for that. And that's it. Any questions?
I just have one
Yes.
last thing. Just, with supporting, the curriculum and learning that goes on in the district, the IT infrastructure that we're talking about also supports, we support the projectors and the presentation spaces in the auditoriums. We are working with outside groups trying to broadcast information. We provide the transport for the student TV programs, as well as the security cameras and all of those systems that we use here in the district. So it's not, we're not only supporting the instructional parts of it, we're also doing a lot of the behind the scenes from behind the scenes and other services across the district that use computers and technology.
Okay, who wants to start with questions?
I had to put out the last. You go first.
No, I just have a comment, really. Clearly, as you look at the budget that you're presenting in both areas, both the IT and in Learning Commons, you're up over last year. However, you're $600,000 lower than you were a year ago, which is, I find, remarkable. And maybe you can tell me what that drive is to get that reduction. According to the books, okay? I'm looking, if you look here.
Oh, I know what it is.
Huh?
Yeah, so when we had to cut the budget last year,
Yeah.
cut this budget, we squirreled away some money because we froze and we pre-spent. So I think a portion of that was some of the pre-spending we did, so that shows
A
what
year
the
ago.
variance is. In this,
In 2019.
Yes.
in 2000, we
19.
pre-spent in 18-19 a
Right.
portion to buy down the budget we're currently in.
And in the 2000, in this budget, so
Yes.
it's not really a true reflection.
No.
Yeah.
We're if
Or
you remember,
still,
it was
but
just part of
still,
our strategy.
$600,000 is not bad, compared to a year ago.
No, but I do think, and if you go back and look at the total, I haven't looked at these numbers now in a year, but in terms of where our spend is. I think we're now back at 15, 16 levels, and we're doing far more than we did in 15, 16.
Yes,
Not this year, last year.
we're still under 15, 16 levels.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so we are.
Yeah, can I see that, Eric?
That was our 15, 16 level.
Yeah.
And 16, 17 was our
I guess
first.
my question is that, so we're now in year 4 since conception, and, right, and so is there anything that kind of was not accounted for, or anything that, any like increases that you feel, like anything unexpected? You know, is there something that you feel like the plan is not being able to be implemented the way it was originally visioned? Or like
No.
resource-wise,
I- Yeah, I think.
because I'm not privy to like the
Yeah,
Thank
so,
you.
we were, if you go back 5, 6, 7 years, you know, I think we had a very mom and pop approach to IT. And there wasn't clarity of vision around digital learning or the role of
It was
digital
pitiful.
instruction.
Pitiful,
The
basically what it was.
infrastructure wasn't solid, and so through conversations and a series of, you know, personnel changes, we were able to hire Eric through Novus as a third-party contract, outsource essentially all of the back-end IT, modernize our infrastructure, get kind of wraparound 24/7 support, which we didn't have when we had people here. And then we brought Fran on to do the really forward-looking digital learning and focus on Portrait of the Graduate. So what I've observed in the last several years is the amount of responsibilities that Eric and the Novus team have taken on have grown. So, you know, we were originally thinking buckets, wires, servers, computers, student and teacher facing, when in reality they're doing all of that. Plus they're now supporting through kind of our standardization some of the IT needs and security. They had a hand in the phone upgrades. We weren't even thinking, honestly, about the modernizing presentation spaces, so that's all of new. And then with just the aging of equipment, that was a piece that we weren't really thinking very clearly about either. So replacing smart boards, sound fields, those other kinds of peripherals. So, you know, the support that they're providing has grown. And then, you know, kind of in the new era of needs around cybersecurity, I mean, we weren't even talking about that at all 4 years ago. So that's a major change.
The noise level has diminished dramatically from where we were 5 years ago from students and parents.
Yeah, our goal
You
is
have no
to
idea
not
what it's
talk
like.
about it, right? We wanted the technology to be invisible because we want people to talk about the learning. And so even that whole idea of what does it mean to be ready access, you know, that was a concept where we didn't want to be talking about devices, you know, Chromebook versus something else. We wanted to talk about what's the learning, what's the best tool, and do we have the, you know, best paved highway to get the information and the resources kids need digitally.
Andy?
Yeah, my question is, are we a Google platform or an Apple platform? Because I know all the teachers are on, and I'm talking K through 8, not
Right.
when you have BOE.
Right, we're a Google platform.
Right, but the teachers are all in Apple?
Well,
Because you were saying Jam F to roll
So
stuff down.
basically, in our pre-K through first grade, we have pods of iPads
Right,
in the classrooms.
right,
And so they are iOS,
right,
and we have a suite of apps that we use for those.
right.
Past first grade, then we get to G Suite. We have Chromebooks beginning in second grade and on, and all of our students have access to G Suite.
So what are we using the Jam F platform for?
Jamf is a way to push out the apps. So basically, the apps that go to the iPad. In the
So
old
it's just
days.
for the K and
Yeah,
one.
and where we have iPads, we have carts of iPads everywhere.
I guess that's what throws me off, is why we spend so much money on carts of iPads if we're a Google
Well,
G
there
Suite?
are, so it's.
Better teaching tools for
Right,
little
just for
kids.
using
There's
the
specific,
apps.
there's
Yeah.
specific, tools that you can't have on a Chromebook.
Okay,
Well,
so,
we
sorry.
also, if I could just jump in, we also try and provide the right tool or best tool. So in the high school, for instance, for the videography and some of our art courses, we use Mac desktops.
Right,
They're robust, reliable, and that's what they're gonna see in the professional spaces for the most part. We also have, for some of the music classes, we have we have iPad cards, and for some of the art classes, we have
Okay.
that with pens. because that's the proper device for that instructional
Okay.
practice. So we have these pods throughout the district, whereas where Google is our primary platform, but where needed or instructionally, relevant, we make sure we have those devices
Got it.
available.
And then, looking at the, section on library learning columns for the 8220s, the specific you went through, 8220, 44237, digital resources, so that
Mhm.
258,000. Do you have that, I know you went through
The
a
new,
bunch, do you have
yeah,
it broken down, like,
I do.
you do have it
Yes.
broken down?
I'm sending Debbie a
Perfect, yeah,
copy.
you could send
You
that
send
to
it
her.
to
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely.
Thank you.
And,
Because
it-
some things like, I come from a world of Zoom, Skype, oh my God, like all of that.
Yeah,
I know it costs a fortune, and I just don't wanna get into and I'm just using this as one example, that we start videoing all this stuff,
No,
and then we
no, no,
hold
no.
this content and like,
so this
What
is
are we doing
actually
with
our
this?
first entree into that, and we're
Right.
not going to go into it, we're not spending a ton on
Okay.
Zoom, for example.
And the
So
license is $500, isn't it?
$600, I think is what we
600,
said.
and that covers the whole,
Yeah, for
Okay.
what we need for now.
okay, perfect.
Okay, I had a couple of questions. And it's not to say that this isn't a great budget, or that we don't have a wonderful vision. I think those were both true. And that we haven't made good investments, and we're seeing a great return on. I am just concerned about the year-to-year increase, and looking back 2 years to 3 years, and realizing just the numbers continue to grow quite a bit. And what's not in here that we do have to justify this year are the 2 library learning commons staff that were embedded in this year's budget, but will show up budget to budget. So if you add those staff plus your large increase, and it's not that there's not a criticism there, it's not, I think you're wrong over here and you ought to go over here instead, or that's just too much. But putting it into the budget pie, that's my concern, and it's just me speaking at this
Sure.
point, so.
I mean, I can address that to a degree. The staffing changes at the pre-K 5 are due to the fact that if you compare what Wilton does with other districts, there's a position that doesn't exist here. It's the computer teacher. The computer teacher or the technology teacher that exists in other districts, we do not have.
But aren't we
At
doing
that
that in
level.
every class?
We do that in the library learning commons specifically, so coding units of study where we go through and we literally go through, the idea of algorithms and how you create loops and all of that, and the different programs are actually taught in LLC. So we found a need to address 3 sets of standards actually through our LLC. It's the ISTE standards that we've talked about a lot, ASL, so we still have the literacy program embedded in there, and now we have the computer science standards. So we may be calling it something different, but when you actually take what we staff versus what other districts staff, and I have done this because last year we took, the adding of this particular position very seriously, we still are either on par or low in terms of our staffing when you look at how many students are served by each of the LLC staff. So we don't have computer teachers. When you get to the secondary level, you see that we have tech ed teachers. And so all of a sudden, we don't have a third, right? We have 2 at the secondary level in each of the schools. So that's how we actually
Right.
broke it down.
Again, my quarrel
Yeah.
is not the what.
Yeah.
It's the how big in 1 year. And that's it, because as a board, when we look at the whole budget and where all the increases are and all the wonderful, important work that's going on, my question would just be how big a leap or how big a financial investment can we make in any 1 year in certain areas?
Mhm.
So again, it's not the vision, it's not the substance, it's not which programs you're picking, it's not why we need another a library learning commons expert. It's none of those reasons. It's a timing and a size. And if you look over the last years, it looks like every year the numbers are bigger. So that's my
Right.
concern, and it's not a criticism, it's
Sure.
just
No, I
a,
appreciate that.
now we gotta
It's
put
an
it into
observation.
the pie and just kinda say, okay, can we support this, and so we just need to talk.
That kind of dovetails back to my original question, was kind of like, were these increases part of like that 4 or 5 year vision, and then are they set to like stop? You know, is that part of, you know what I'm saying, is this
Yeah,
part
I
of
mean, Debbie
the,
had the same question.
like, is that like part of
Yeah,
the building
I think-
up story, and then, you know, you have like a,
Yeah, and my guess is you've asked for even more, and this is the pared down version, but,
Well.
you know, so.
So our first year when we came in, we actually made some cuts too. And one of the things I think we have to kind of take in totality is the fact that, you know, Eric and I talk about this all the time, we have probably a lot of IT staff that we also, don't have currently. And a lot of those types of things, you have to think about, how things have changed. So instead of, doing a lot of break fixing, we have, staff doing things that are, you know, much more important to student learning, right? Or we have certified, and we have people that are working with students and empowering them to be leaders in technology. So we did actually make some changes to the organizational table when we came in, even with the LLC staff, and we looked at it as a totality. One of the things we did was we had lots of assistants here at the high school, and we did actually pare that down. So we did actually some major thinking and work around what that was. In addition to that, we were at the very same time developing a curriculum. And I was here prior to that first year as a consultant for the curriculum. And the program was very different. All of the presentations I did about the library learning commons really had more to do with a lot of the things that we're talking about with the portrait of the graduate and what that would take to be able to do. And some of the things that it really requires is to have staff that are experts to be able to bring students through. It's great to have the equipment, lovely to have the resources. If you don't have the expertise working with the students on a day-to-day basis and the teachers. So our LLC staff also basically leads PD. They help at the building level with making sure all these tools work and teachers can get to them and students can get to them. They have,
Is that like
they
a
run
Skip
their
Floss?
makerspace.
Is Skip Floss like under this? I'm just trying to think of.
Skip is a
He's a
para. No, it's
webmaster.
He also
Brian
does the
Ennis.
webmaster.
Right, so he's
So
like an
he-
instructional learner for
Right.
Runs
military.
video production, runs MDTV.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
work
just-
with
when
those
you're talking,
folks
I'm trying to-
too, because they actually kind of, you know, work together, the video folks
Right.
with, yeah. At Cider Mill, Jason Greasley is, the, you know, the tech IL, and we have the LLC staff that works. So we have maker spaces, for example, now, and maker spaces are, now need to be staffed. It would be a really bad, way of going if we had all of this great stuff, but we didn't have the staff to make sure that we were successful with it.
But how do we, along the same vein of what Deb was asking, you know, I think about being on the PTA a couple years ago at Miller Driscoll and the smart boards, and we were trying to get smart boards into every classroom. And now I heard you say, like, we're trying to get rid of smart boards. How do we stay atop of this?
Oh,
like-
we didn't say that.
No, we didn't.
Oh, you were
no.
saying we're
No,
trying to
no, no.
Well, we have
replace
to
the smart boards.
replace them
Sorry,
as they
replace them. I thought you meant
break.
replace them
Yes.
with something new.
Yeah, every 10 years, we really need to, there's about a 10-year life cycle. So part of the plan is looking down 10 years down the road to say, okay, you know, we need to plan for the replacement of all these
Right.
wonderful devices.
I thought you meant
and-
replace this and bring new something else in. Okay, I
No,
didn't
no,
know you meant
it's-
replace
it's-
the actual
yeah.
device. But I think you bring up a good point. I mean.
Yeah, it's again, it's the size of the increase this
Yeah.
year, it's not what you're doing.
And the
or
size of the
staff.
increase from a year ago to, I mean, looking at continuing services from 4,000 to 59,000 over 2 years.
Where's that? I'm sorry.
8220, 49,627, along with Deb was saying, not just the
Contracted
staff,
services.
contracted services, sorry. It's such a huge increase over, I think Deb was.
Are you talking about 58 to 59?
No.
Oh, it's contracted services.
Contracted services,
Yeah, so it's,
Going from
it's
4,000.
104,000 increase year over year.
Is that-
Yeah.
So Mary Ann, what's in that line? That's, Okay.
Of the 104,000?
Oh, that's yours.
That's my line.
Oh, it's like the 59.
Sorry, that's my line.
No, sorry, it's
No, it's
82.
on 8220.
Yeah, 8220. I'm gonna start to get on
Under
yours.
learning commons.
8220, 49627.
Right.
Under moderate
No,
learning
you're saying,
commons.
you're
Learning
saying it
commons.
correctly.
Like how things go so over year, compounded, so.
8220 is,
So this one
The
right here.
59,000.
It's this year, 59 and went up to 58.
Yeah.
They
So
went
that's-
from-
it was 5, then it was 22, 5, and now it's 58.
Well, you know what, I can
Oh, okay,
answer
so
part
let
of
me-
that. Part
okay.
of that is
I
because
did-
some of it was at the building level,
Yes.
and we moved it
Ah,
into
thank you.
programs.
Yes.
Okay.
So it wasn't
Oh.
that we weren't doing the programs, is
Yeah.
that we centralized it so
Yeah.
that we can keep track of the
That's,
programs.
so there's some context here that, and maybe, so that's, Marianne, why don't you and I work on that, just so you have the full context. So it looks like an ad on paper, but it's not necessarily an ad. I think there are a couple of features. One is we've, as Fran was describing, we've pulled some of these that had been living in the respective school budgets
Yeah.
Right.
into a centralized. So let's just try to categorize some of that change so we can see what was in the budget someplace else, what was, we also talked about doing some pre-spending, which inflates the ad, and then what's the true ad? Because there is, some of the digital resources is a true ad. There are contractual
Well, 'cause
increases which are a true
Let's talk
ad.
about digital resources. In 17-18, it was set at 110,000, and it's proposed to be 258,000.
What's
That's
that?
a huge increase, the same area,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's called
So
digital
I honestly.
resources. So, again, that's just a
No,
huge.
no, I think what we need to do
kinda
is do
snowball
exactly
effect.
what Marianne is saying, because
Okay.
in my budget are things like Naviance, that's being used by the counselors. The Discovery Tech books, which are for science and social studies and math,
It would be nice to see it.
IXL, they were in the buildings or in departments. So we centralized it, so I can buy them, in a centralized
Right,
way.
well, then that helps.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
110
that's
to
exactly what's going on.
Yeah, it's not
258,000
necessarily
in
new
3
money.
years is
Yeah,
a
Right.
huge increase.
No, when I went through it and I said there was basically 17 or 18,000 increase in digital resources, that's because the rest of it was basically moved over from departments in the high school. So I'm supporting music programs, music notation programs. I'm supporting world language programs. So it's everything. in
Okay,
my-
again, I'm not
yeah.
calling with the what,
Right,
I'm just
right.
calling with the growth in the numbers here.
Right. And wondering, does this continue every year, right? I mean, on some level, yes, it is, the budget will probably grow because it's technology and I get
Right,
that, but
right.
will it be, how significant of a growth will it be every time?
But we shouldn't have that shift from the school because we've
Right.
just pulled it in, so.
So when
we
you
should be
guys
seeing
kind of
that
So just to
level
see the larger,
separated for us,
so
then
you
maybe
should
it'll
see
be
a
easier.
decline somewhere within.
Well, you should see it level off, you
leveling
shouldn't,
off.
right, and
Right.
just maintaining the programs that you
We're just saying
are
you should see a decline in
supporting.
schools, and then you
You-
should see
you
a
should-
decline by.
Well, what you would do is, and if you went back to the schools and their contract services, you should see a reduction.
on those lines.
So if we went back to the year that happened, there was probably a note on the page at that point in time.
Yeah, move
In
to,
the budget book, it's just not carried forward in this book.
Right, but again, when we present to the public, and my initial understanding is if something's going up 20% in 1 year or 16% in 1 year, that's like a holy cow. So that's the issue.
And I think to that point, I was the same as just like to have like a better story around, the high school itself is a 1.5% increase, but athletics is an 8% increase. So that's, when you're communicating to a larger audience, telling that full story, because while we have a lot of student athletes, we also have a lot of parents who say, well, what about the classroom?
Mhm.
So,
A lot of moving parts. Okay, all right. Any more questions? Oh, and we're not too far off the mark in terms of time. So I know we could continue talking forever, so why don't we just put this up tomorrow?
Well,
Is
well
that-
done,
is that
guys.
okay? But thank you so much. Thank you.
You guys are doing great work.
Yes,
Go back.
absolutely.
Back tomorrow.
You weren't here.
Additional
You weren't here that day.
Stand by.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got other fish to fry tomorrow. Yeah, I think,
7:16.
you have some of that, because you were tracking some of
I've
the.
been, yeah,
So
and
let's,
that's why I
let's,
said it was only 10,000 was the additional.
yeah, so let's do a summary sheet on just those, you know, what's new, you know, what's a transfer from a different budget. And then I think the third piece was particularly in year over year. What's that?
You're so good, I was gonna say.